This happened a few months ago, but I still don't know what happened. I'm so scared that I can't go back to my house, so I'm renting a place on Airbnb. Since then, I've been trying to figure out what happened, but I still haven't found any answers. Here's a little background. I had just moved into a new house, and in front of it there's an abandoned house. I know it sounds like something out of a horror movie, but that's exactly what made me want to buy the house. I've always liked abandoned places, especially those with scary stories. This mansion, for example, belonged to the same family for years, but back in the 1900s, all the family members suddenly disappeared and the house has been abandoned ever since. I thought this was really interesting at first, and I was really enjoying my new house. But one day I got curious about the mansion and decided to take a peek. When I went inside, the atmosphere was strange. I can't explain it, but I felt like something was wrong, like someone was watching me. I went home with my heart racing, for no apparent reason. I've never really believed in the supernatural, so this took me by surprise. After that, whenever I came home at night, I felt like someone was watching me from the mansion. Soon after, I started hearing noises inside my house, mainly coming from the kitchen and living room, but I always thought it was just in my head, like those sounds you hear when you're almost asleep and you don't even know if they're real or part of a dream. Then last night I was sleeping in the living room because my room gets really hot in the summer. I put my blankets on the floor. I've loved doing this since I was a kid, turned off the TV and turned off all the lights. When I turned off the light in the living room, a very uncomfortable feeling came over me, so I got under the blankets and started watching funny videos to calm myself down. While I was scrolling through Instagram, I suddenly heard a voice in the corner of the room and froze. I couldn't move because I was so scared. The voice said, "There's something you don't understand." And then another voice repeated the same phrase, but the words got mixed up and I couldn't make out the rest. Then more voices started, one after the other, until it was a complete mess. My body went paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. The voices suddenly stopped, and hours passed while I was still frozen. I wanted to move my leg because it was super uncomfortable, but I was afraid. When I was finally working up the courage to move, the voices came back. This time, I decided to try recording the sound. I slowly moved my fingers until I opened the recording app and started recording a video. But, by accident, the video played automatically right after it was recorded. My heart almost stopped. I knew that whatever was in the corner of the room now knew that I had recorded it. I quickly plugged in my headphones and as soon as I did, the voices stopped again. At least now I had a recording, so I could confirm that I wasn't imagining it. But it only got worse because now I know that something was really there. I spent the rest of the night sweating under the covers, afraid to even move a leg. When day finally came, I told everyone what had happened, but as you can imagine, no one believed me. Everyone thought I had dreamed it or was imagining things. Now, I can't stop thinking about it and I'm terrified of going home. I think I'll have to move again before I go crazy. In 2018, 3 friends and I, all in our 20s, decided to spend a week in Bali. The trip was cheap and we had time, so we thought, why not? The plan was to see the sights, try the local food, climb a mountain and enjoy the beach. The typical things you would expect from a trip to Indonesia. And let me tell you, it was amazing. The country is beautiful and the food was amazing. There was just one thing that bothered me, the local vendors. There were people constantly trying to sell us things on the street. It was kind of annoying, but we could deal with it. The real problem started on the last night. Our Airbnb was very simple, super cheap, and the door lock was kind of improvised. It was 2 wooden doors that only closed with a piece of wood that fit into the holes in the door. It was basic, but it worked until it didn't. On the last night, we realized that the wooden block was missing. I thought someone of us must have lost it, so we used a selfie stick to hold the door open. It wasn't the best idea, but it was what we had. We went to bed without any major worries, since we had been there for almost a week without any problems. But in the middle of the night, I woke up to some strange clicking noises. I thought it was one of my friends, so I got up and went to check. But when I got to the living room, they were all asleep. I followed the sound to the door and saw that it was half open, and the selfie stick was crooked. I peeked through the crack and saw 3 people trying to force the door open. I yelled to them what they wanted, and one of them was holding the block of wood that had disappeared. I was shocked, especially since one of the guys was the same guy who cleaned the Airbnbs during the day. He said he had found the block of wood outside and was returning it, but it was obvious that something was wrong. I called my friends and the three men ran out. We stayed up the rest of the night, afraid that they would come back. The next morning, we went to the Airbnb front desk, and the scariest part came. The cleaning staff was made up of all women. In other words, the guy I had seen and thought was a member of the staff was actually a stranger who had somehow gotten into our room when we weren't there. In the end, no one was hurt, and nothing of value was taken, but I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't woken up that night. I want to tell this story to warn people. It's not scary, just weird, but at the time it scared me a lot. I was traveling around the country by car. I had been on the road for over a week, and I slept in the car to save money. When I arrived in a bigger city, I decided to give myself a break and sleep in a real bed, so I chose an Airbnb because it was cheaper than a hotel. I booked the place the day before I arrived and didn't have many options. I found an apartment that seemed new, modern, well located, and at a great price. But there was one detail: it was a new listing with no reviews. I thought the low price was because there were no reviews yet and decided to take a chance. When I got to the building, it was older than I expected, and I soon realized that probably only my apartment had been renovated. The building itself looked like a dormitory, all unkempt, but I let it go. I hadn't paid much, so I wasn't expecting luxury. The apartment looked just like the photos, so that was fine. The first 2 days, everything was fine. Since I was traveling alone, I always take precautions. I don't go out at night and I lock all the locks, including the door chain. On the third day, I left in the morning, came back late in the afternoon to get ready before going to the beach, and as always, I locked the door with everything, including the chain. While I was watching TV and changing my clothes, out of nowhere, the door unlocked and someone tried to open it. The only reason they didn't get in was because I had put the chain on it. I reacted quickly. I closed the door again and locked it. I couldn't see who was trying to get in, but I was terrified. I thought it might be the owner of the apartment, but I wasn't going to check out until the next day, so that didn't make sense. I called the owner and explained what had happened. She said that only she and I had the keys and that she was at work, so it couldn't be her. I was afraid to stay there, but I also didn't want to leave because all my things were in the apartment. I called my father, and he thought it was really strange that someone had another key. He spoke to the owner, who promised to come over with a locksmith to change the locks and give me new keys. She explained that she had only owned the apartment for 6 months and that, before me, she had only had one other reservation on Airbnb. She also said that the building was under renovation, which explained its poor appearance. The owner suggested that perhaps someone connected to the previous owner still had a copy of the keys. But what scares me the most is that, in all the days that I left and stayed away for hours, the only time anyone tried to break in was when I was there for 10 minutes. Did they see me coming? What were they trying to do? These questions still bother me to this day. I feel very lucky that I used the chain on the door. I don't even want to think about what might have happened if I hadn't. After this, I will no longer stay in Airbnbs that have no reviews or that seem too good to be true. My room is downstairs and I live with my parents, my sister, and a maid. I usually lock the door when I'm in my room because it makes me feel safer, and the key is always in the lock on the inside. I never take the key out because I don't have a spare, so I only lock it from the inside, never from the outside. A few days ago, the maid saw me in the living room upstairs and asked if I could unlock the room so she could clean it. I laughed and told her it wasn't locked, but she insisted that she had tried to open it several times and it seemed to be locked, which scared her. She knew I was upstairs with my sister and my parents weren't home. Plus, they would never go into my room and lock the door. I went downstairs to check, and when I tried, the door opened normally, without being locked or jammed. I've lived here for over 10 years and the door has always worked perfectly. I closed and opened it several times to test it, but everything was fine. I ignored what the maid said, thinking that maybe it had gotten stuck for a moment, but she insisted that it really did look like a locked door, because she tried really hard and it wouldn't open at all. The next day, my sister forgot her straightener in my room and tried to open the door several times, without success. She even called the maid, and they both tried to force it, but nothing. When I got home, I saw them both trying to open it and laughed, thinking it was a prank. My sister got angry, asking why I had locked the room. I said that I hadn't, and when I went there, the door opened right away. They both stared at me as if they had seen a ghost. I thought they were joking with me, even though it wasn't the kind of thing they usually do. Yesterday, it happened again. My father called me to say that a package had arrived for me. He tried to put it in my room, but found the door locked. So he left the package outside. That's when I started to get really worried. I asked him if he thought the door was stuck, but he said it was clearly locked. The strange thing is that the window has bars on the outside and is always locked. No one could have gotten in through there, and it is impossible to lock the door from the outside since the key is always on the inside. Now I am confused and scared. Is there something, or someone, stopping people from getting into my room? On June 26th, my boyfriend, his best friend, and his girlfriend drove to Big Bear. The next day, another friend arrived to join us. He stayed downstairs, since there were only 2 bedrooms, and the couple stayed upstairs. The cabin was very isolated, in the middle of the woods, with no outside lights. It was scary with the howling of coyotes and the presence of bears all around, but at first everything seemed peaceful. On the night of the 27th, around midnight, when my boyfriend and I were in bed, our friend who was sleeping downstairs started banging on the door in despair. He said he heard footsteps outside and when he looked out the window, saw a large man trying to open the front door. At first, I thought he was just trying to scare us, but my boyfriend got serious. He got up, walked around the cabin, and even went outside to investigate. We went upstairs to the other couple's room, which had a balcony with a sliding glass door. Now, I have to say that I am naturally anxious and easily scared, while my boyfriend is always calm and logical. I always think the worst, but he never gets upset. But this time, when he pulled back the curtain and looked outside, he jumped up and screamed, "Oh my God." Seeing my boyfriend, a strong and calm guy, scared made me even more scared. He quickly closed the door and calmly told us that there was a big man standing in the woods, looking right at us. Everyone panicked. I ran and locked the door, and we decided that we would all stay in the room together, on guard. It was summer and very hot, but we didn't want to open any windows, we were so scared. After about 30 minutes of not making any noise outside, I started to get irritated by the heat and the fact that we were all crammed into a small room with 3 men. So my boyfriend and I went back to our room, but I was still very scared. He tried to cheer me up, and around 1:30 in the morning, I told him I didn't want to sleep with the lights off because I was so scared. He understood, and we left the lights on. Finally, just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a loud noise. I sat up in bed and looked at my boyfriend, who looked back at me. Suddenly, the power went out. I immediately started crying. I tried to run out of bed, but my legs got caught in the sheets and I fell. My boyfriend helped me up, and we grabbed our phones and ran to the room where the rest of the group was. I was so nervous, I tried calling the Airbnb host, but his phone wasn't working. I tried calling my dad, but neither of our phones had signal. We were completely isolated there, until the friend who had arrived the next day noticed that his phone had 1 bar of signal because he was using another carrier. He quickly called the local sheriff. Now that I think back, it may seem like an overreaction, but at the time, we were terrified. The sheriff transferred us to the power company, but they said they didn't cover that area because it was too isolated. However, they said they would send the fire department to help us. When the fire department arrived and investigated the area, they discovered that someone had cut the power to the cabin outside. Worse still, they tried to force open the back door but were unable to get in. We were very lucky that nothing bad happened to us. To this day, when I think about that night, I wonder what would have happened if our friend hadn't called the sheriff. It could have been much worse.